Yo, what's good? It's Andrew with DCI, bro, and today I'm giving you the top 20 DCI shows of all time. Now, I'm gonna add this disclaimer like I usually do. This is my list, this is my opinions, and of course it's biased. And there are gonna be groups on here like you're like, why did you put this on here? There are gonna be some shows that are like, why is this not higher and lower than this other group? So and so. Anyways, that being said, we are going to get right on into it with number 20. This took some time because I wanted to ask myself for number 20, what would be that one that just like really is something I remember and it really made an impact because this group that I'm going to show number 20, they hadn't made finals for a while. Like it had been a good couple of years that they didn't make finals, and I think this show really put themselves in the contention finally. And this is none other than the Troopers from 2022. This is a show where the Troopers were like, okay, we hadn't been in finals for since what, 2007? So it had been a really, really long time since they made finals. And when I first saw this show, I'm like, this is one where they put themselves out there and they said, we are the Troopers. We are here and we're here to stay. And they had the really big prop with the oil rig and whatever. And I just really think with this show, not only did it bring the Troopers back because they've been in finals since, and I just think the vibe of it, I think the dark kind of feel to this really, really pushed the Troopers forward. And I really like how the show went. So, at number 19, I have the Regiment from 2003. Now, I think a lot of you are going to be like, whoa, why is this show so low? It's because the other 18 in front of it made a more impact to me. Now, this is one where Regiment, they use, in their warm-ups, they use a lot of the music from this show. And if you remember from 2021, when DCI was trying to come back, what Regiment did is they really harkened back to this show. It was one of the most memorable shows that Phantom had did, and I just think in general this show just really, really left an impact on a lot of people, including myself, so that's why it's number 19. Number 18, this might be a little bit of a hot take. I have Carolina Crown 2015. Now, if you remember, in 2015, for a long time, Carolina Crown's 2015 Inferno show, it was gonna win, right? It had the dark elements to it. It had a lot of really clean brass movements in it. It had a lot of visually striking things going on. And it really was one of those shows that should have won. But then we know what happened. Blue Devils came back and won the championship. But the reason I have it so low, like I've said, there are other shows ahead of it that I really think just leave a big impact. And I'm not saying this one didn't, but just in general, I really love this show. I really love what it did. Carolina Crown 2015. Now, this is a bit of a hot take, but I think Carolina Crown 2016 is slightly above it. Now, you're going to ask yourself, why 16 ahead of 15? It is because you have the really dark elements where they have the sabers and the rifles, if you will, pointed at the person driving the big rig, if you will. And it really, really built off of what Crown had been doing the last couple of years at this point. And I just think with the music, with the opener, that classic opener, with the brass being super loud, there's so many clips of Carolina Crown warming up, and they would use parts of this show, and it was just in your face. It was dark, and it was just clean. And really one of the most iconic DCI shows is this one. Now we have Blue Devils 2019. Now, shout out to the Funliner production group because they're really good. I like what they're doing on YouTube. And most of those people that are in the Funliners production YouTube channel, a lot of them marched in this show. And I did get to see this show when they were in Hattiesburg, Mississippi at the Southern Mississippi show. And when I saw it in person, I was like, okay, I saw a couple of clips of them doing this and that. But seeing this in person, the way they executed on all levels, with the brass being clean, the color guard, with the props they use, like the door kind of thing, and then the way they lowered them down, the way they moved it around. Really, this is a show where if you wanted visual excellence, if you wanted the way the props moved around, if you wanted the way to be clean, this is a show you have to just take inspiration from, and that's why I have it at 16th, is because it is so visually done, and it really helps out with our post-COVID shows because of the way that props are being used now, where there's some props but not a ton of them, and that's really what I like to see. Now, this is going to really say, why'd you put this here? So, let me take you back to 2021. This was the year after COVID, and a lot of people were like, okay, what is DCI going to look like now that COVID has arrived and that COVID has been a thing for a year? Blue Devils didn't compete. The Blue Coats were there at that celebration show, and they did a couple of things. Regiment was one of the really big shows there because it really went back to what Regiment had done, because they've really fallen back to things that didn't really work for Regiment. But let me tell you, Cavaliers 2021, it is one of those DCI shows that I go back to over and over and over and over again because of how loud, because of how just insane the show was. And it really was just a harken back to things that they had wanted to do, but they couldn't. And really just overall, I just love the classic kind of vibe for the Cavaliers in this show. I've seen them warm up, and it's just one of those things where I think the Blue Coats brass arranger and the Blue Coats brass caption head, Kevin, he was guiding the brass in this show for 2021, and I think it's really what makes the Blue Coats of these days as impactful and modern as they are is because of this show. So really, this show should be given credit to where the Blue Coats are as far as their brass, in terms of their visual design, is from this show. Number 14, I have Crusaders 2022. This is another show that really solidified Boston, because I want you to think about this. There were times where Boston was in the 10th to 8th range. You know, they were around, and you saw the percussion group from the Cadets come over, and they really made an impact. But this is the show that I think really solidified Boston as a top 5 world-class group. And of course, in a couple of years, we saw they won the championship. But you have to think about it like this. Boston, their percussion, that percussion line, the snare line, just that front line, was some of the best percussion we have ever seen. I think that is one of the best battery, tenor, whatever you want to call it. It is one of the best percussion books, period. And it was done so well. I think what really took this down, though, is there were some visual moments that were like, okay, what is going on here? And really, it's just, I think in general, this is one of those shows that you cannot just talk about the best DCI shows without this one. It was just done so well. At number 13, I have Cavaliers 2002 with their Framework show. This is one of those classic shows where they didn't have a whole lot of props, but what they did is they used these bars, kind of like PVC, if you will, and what the Cavaliers did just visually with the drill going in and out. And then they had that iconic thing where they put all the poles down on the field, and the Cavaliers did like this like mechanical kind of thing where they went around this box, kind of like maze thing, if you will. And the way they did it with the percussion, the way they did it just overall design-wise, it is one of the best designed shows, period. Like, if you want to be a design person in DCI, if you want to look at how the brass did it, and just in general, how they executed with this show was just phenomenal. Speaking of a phenomenally designed show, we have our current DCI champions, the Crusaders from 2025. This is a show where they didn't have a whole lot of props, but they were moving, and they were moving very fast. And this is where I think going forward in the future, groups need to understand if you're going to use props, they need to be functional, and they need to add to the show. There was one show, Crown 2018, they had the really big teetering thing. This is an example of what not to do, because I think that prop should have been used a lot more than it should have, right? You had this really big prop, it was on the field, and they kind of used it, but they kind of didn't. It was just there. The Crusaders, however, with the balls, with the poles, they used them so much during the show. I really feel like this is what most groups need to do, which is if you're going to use props, they need to add to the design of the show. Because I think a lot of points and a lot of things are added and removed based on how well you can use these props in the design of the show. Can you connect with the group? Can you connect with the judges? What does it add to it? I think this is just a show that a lot of groups, and even high school groups and college groups, need to look to inspiration for as far as modern DCI, modern marching band groups going forward. Speaking of champions, the previous DCI champions, the Bluecoats 2024, when I say this is one of the best Bluecoat show I have seen in a long time, this is it. This is a show, very minimal props. They had the red rectangles. They moved them all around the field. I have watched this show so many times. The brass, they deserve to win the brass group this year in 2024. They deserve to win it. Percussion was on it. They were nails this year. This is just one of the shows where when you're talking about design, when you're talking about general effect, when you're talking about visual, this checked all the boxes. And it's no just comparison to how this one was compared to the ones before it. Because it is one of those modern shows that did the electronics correctly. They did the uniforms, costumes correctly. They did all of that. Speaking of which, if you made it this far into the video, if this video gets 25 likes, I will do my top 25 uniforms, costumes of DCI history. I will do it. This video needs to hit 25 likes. Let's go. Anyways, Bluecoats 2024, just a well done show. Next, I have Crown of 2014. With the way they did this show, it came off from the Crown 2013 show. And we will see this other show, spoiler alert. But with the way that Carolina Crown 2013 did their show, I really liked how 2014, they had the visual moments. They had just the best brass section, period. It's no reason how that they won, because they should have won the brass. But they got fourth. And it's one of those shows where it's like, I can see why it should have been top 3, but you have to think 2014 was such an overly competitive year for drum corps to where I can see it getting 4th and 5th. It's because of all the other shows that were of that time. The Bluecoats from 2016, this was the first year Bluecoats won the show, and this is what I think really set off the domino effect of groups getting away from the traditional uniforms and going to a more design-wise uniform costume look. Because if you remember, the Bluecoats from 2016, they just had a line going down their leotards, their spandex uniforms, if you will, and it really pushed DCI forward to pull the trigger to use uniforms and costumes that weren't traditional. And a lot of people debated about this. But if you look at the huge slides that they had, if you look at the uniforms they had, if you look at the overall cleanliness of this show and them winning general effect, it is no surprise why Bluecoats of 2016 won that year. It's just so well done. Now, at 8th, I have the Blue Devils from 2014, the highest show in DCI history. A lot of people still debate this show as far as should it have been the highest scoring DCI show. And I think just in terms of visual, in terms of just being perfect, this show, they did it perfectly. Like, they had some props on the field. This is one of those where if you're looking at perfection, it is probably one of the closest things we're going to get. Just because of how they were able to just march effectively, to play effectively. There were virtually no mistakes at all. They had the windmill kind of aspect to it. The percussion was just off the wall that year. And I just think, yes, it should have been a top show of all time. I don't know if it necessarily should have been a 99.6 out of 100, but it definitely is one of those shows that's memorable just because of how well they executed. Now, this is the Cadets of 2010, the Demons and Angels shows. Rest in peace to the Cadets. And I believe in general, this is a show that really pushed the activity forward of what design should be. Because you had literally the group split in half between the group wearing white and the group wearing their burgundy color. And what I really like about this show is how striking the show was. You had a group on one side that was this white, angelic. They played a lot of classical things. And then on the other side, the demon side, if you will, they played a lot of striking, a lot of dissonant kind of things. And I think general effect and design, this is what I wish a lot of groups would do. Where if you're going to use uniforms, if you're going to use costumes, you need to really give the judges a reason to stick around. You need to give the fans a reason to be like, well, what's going to happen here? And it really invites people and really pulls people into watching this show. And I just love it in general. In 6th, we have Phantom of 2008 with Spartacus. This is just one of the most iconic shows in DCI history. I'm going to say it right now. I don't think most people are going to argue with me on this. This is a show that it told a story, but it really got people invested because it wasn't just, oh, fun show. No, it was a dark show. There was oppression going on. There was death in this show. Not actually literally, but you had the fighting going on with the Spartans, the hierarchy class that was happening in this time. It had a historical aspect to this show, and it really, really sold people. And there was a point where Phantom 2008 wasn't even winning. They were second for a long time. But then at the last final show, they did enough to just win, and I am so glad that Phantom 2008 won. Now, speaking of shows that won, we have SCV 2018, a top 5 show. If you're going to show a DCI show of the modern age, I would show this hands down. Because if you look at the way that horn line was marching around the field, if you look at the way the percussion was moving and the design and general effect, there's no excuse to why, why can't this be a #1 show? And I'm so glad it won. Because it is a show. The brass was off the charts, percussion was off the charts, that classic Paul Riddick line, and the way that the design was there, this is a show that if you're going to talk about DCI of the modern age, you have to do this. You have to show it. Speaking of a show you have to talk about, this is what I would consider one of the pillars of DCI, is Madison Scouts of 1998. I remember during COVID, when DCI wasn't happening, I went down a rabbit hole and I found the one video, I don't know if you all saw it, it's the top 5 DCI closers of all time. You cannot talk about DCI closers without this. And what I really like about the Scouts of 1998 is it really pushed DCI forward. It was one of those shows, it was aggressive. Like when you're talking about shows that are what brass groups need to be like, what brass groups need to sound like, this is it. This is a show that if you're talking about what brass horn lines need to sound like, what percussion needs to sound like, this just had the general effect in terms of, we are in your face, you're not going to tell us to go away, this is what we're going to do. I really like what they did with this show. Speaking of design, visual, general effect, brass, percussion, in general, this is my top 3 shows. Blue Devils 2017, I have played that so many times. As a trumpet player, this is one of the shows that have inspired me the most in terms of just playing really high notes, in terms of just the brass writing, in terms of visual, in terms of selling the show to the audience, selling the show to the judges. This is one of the cleanest shows I've ever seen. Because it is a show, when you talk about DCI, you have to show it. It is so clean. It is just one of those shows you have to talk about it. And I am so glad it won. And I know a lot of people hate on the Blue Devils, but I know so many friends that have said, oh, I don't like the Blue Devils winning. This is a show that if it had not won, I think you would have seen a protest because of what this show brought to DCI. You had the changing of the uniforms. You had the design. You had the visuals of it. And I am so glad that this show won in 2017. But I have 2 more shows ahead of it. At number 2, I have Crown 2013. This, when I talk about an inspiration to me, an inspiration as a brass player, in terms of trying to be better than I was yesterday, Crown 2013, they had the brass horn line, and it is the most aggressive, the most perfect, the most just overall. It is a show that if you're trying to be a trumpet player or any brass player, you have to watch this multiple times. There will never be a brass section that gets a perfect 20 out of 20, because if you don't know, each section gets their own subcaption. And you have to understand, it is really hard to get a 19 out of 20, but to get a 20 out of 20 with no mistakes at all, it is so impossible. But yet, Carolina Crown, with their brass, with their percussion, I am so glad they won. Because this is a show that should have won, and I'm so glad they did. This is just one of the shows you have to show everyone. And spoiler alert, I think you all know what my number one show is. It is Blue Coats 2014. Now, I've actually reacted to this show. If you want to see me react to this show, it'll be at the end of the video. I'll have a link to it. But I want you to picture this. Everyone was marching around. They were having really good brass sections. They had really good this and that. But hear me out. This is one of the most inspirational and one of the most boundary-pushing shows, because hear me out. They added the amplification. They added the whole THX stuff at the end of the show. But I want you to think about this. The way they had the field tilted, as the name of the show Tilted was, when they had the seesaws, when they had the amplifications, hear me when I say this. This is one of the most boundary-pushing DCI shows we will ever see. And I think as far as modern DCI, this is one of the shows that really made the old people mad, because it wasn't a traditional show. It wasn't a, oh, this is the power of the brass section, if you will. Because this show added amplification. There were people that had the mics on the field, they had the mics on their horn line to really make them loud. And it really opened up debate to what should be allowed for DCI, what shouldn't be allowed for DCI. And in general, I just believe you cannot talk about just, you can't talk about DCI, one of the best DCI shows of all time, without this one. And I just believe it is still the best DCI show out there because of what it did for DCI, what it did for college bands, what it did for high school groups, because this is a show that pushed the activity forward. And I even saw in 2015 in my high school, we had uniform changes, we had big props, and it added a lot to the show. And then post-COVID, a lot of college groups, a lot of high school groups added electronics and amplifications to add to the show, and this is one of the best shows out there. So, what do you think about this top 20 list? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more DCI shows, as far as DCI ideas, as far as DCI content, make sure you like and subscribe. And if you want to see me react to this show, that video is up here. And until next time, I'm Andrew with DCI Bros. And I'll see you all in the next one.